Okay, let's get started. So, welcome to this introduction to Boost. I'm going to share with you my insights into how you can successfully onboard your leaders, whether they're new into your organisation or they have been promoted. Those are different experiences, but actually some of the principles that sit behind that are very familiar. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. And then I'll share a little bit with you about my Boost program as well. But hopefully you'll be able to take some insights away about how to successfully onboard your leaders, whether you do that yourselves or whether I can help you with Boost. So let's get started. So quick introduction from me. My name's Anna Buttois. I'm a HR professional and have been for 20 years. And I've loved my career in HR, but 2 years ago, I took the decision to go freelance, and I've been building my onboarding, leadership and coaching business since then, Purple Sky Consulting. So Boost is my core program. It's the thing that I'm really proud of, and I'm really delighted to share some of that with you today. But I've been working with leaders on and off throughout my career, helping them to be at their best. And that's also given me insight into why I've created this program as well. So I'll share a little bit of that with you too. So let's start by looking at what the challenges are for leaders when they join organisations, but also what we want from them, what we need from them when they join our organisations, whether they're being promoted or whether they are joining us for the first time. So we need those leaders to be capable and effective, and we need them to be there quickly. We also need them to understand what we need from them in this leadership role. So they may have done a leadership role elsewhere or never before. And therefore, it's important we're clear with them and help them to understand what's required for them in this new role. And we need them then to own that role confidently. We need them to be in a place where they are taking responsibility for that role, being accountable for what's required for them as a leader, and taking that on. But that's not that easy to just do and to just step into. And I think it's really important that although, we've had huge confidence as to why, and that's why we've recruited them, and that's brilliant, and that should be. But to expect somebody just to be able to step into that confidently capable from day one, I think is unfair and unreasonable. And I've got my own experiences of that, and I'll share a little bit of that with you in a moment. But some of the reasons that sit behind why that's so challenging is we need to think about some of those challenges leaders face when they step into new roles. So they may be in a new organisation, there might be a new culture. They've probably got a new line manager, and that person's probably more senior to them, I would expect so, and maybe has a more demanding job, and therefore are they going to be really present? And sometimes there's a risk that some of those senior leaders aren't always the best role models of what we're looking for. I'll leave that to you in terms of how that fits for your organisation. They might now be leading peers or somebody they were going up against for that role. And that presents lots of different challenges for people as they step into new roles. They're likely to be doing things for the first time. So even if they've had some level of team leadership before, stepping into a new organisation, new ways of working, or if they're stepping up into a more senior role, they're definitely going to be taking on new challenges, new things that maybe they've not been prepared for or aren't aware of how to handle that. They haven't had to do that before. So that is incredibly challenging. And they'll have all these relationships that they now need to develop and build, possibly in a different way if they have been promoted, but definitely in a new way if they're new to the organisation. And they're going to want to prove themselves. They might need to prove themselves, especially if they are in a probationary period for their role. So there is a lot going on for that individual in those first 6 months. Let me get you to think about it from this perspective. Stick with me on this one. So how would you feel getting into a car for a long journey with somebody who has no experience of driving, maybe has had no training or very limited training? How are you going to feel about that? And how do you think it feels for that person who's stepping into that driving seat? They might not have anybody alongside them in that passenger seat to support them, to help them, to guide them. That's a very exposing, a very vulnerable place to be. And I felt like that when I went into my new role. So it was slightly different from my perspective. So I had driven the car before. I had done some level of team leadership, but I was stepping up to a much more senior role. You'd given me a bus this time. You could look at it from that perspective. Now, the problem with that is I'd driven before, but I'd never driven this before. It was a completely different game. It was a completely different scenario. I was dealing with completely different challenges that I'd never had to deal with before. And that is difficult. And I'm saying that from a perspective of somebody who'd worked with leaders my whole career, helping them to be at their best. Stepping in and doing that for yourself, even when you've had the training, even when you know the theory, is challenging. And we need to help leaders to do that really well. We need to help them to make that shift and to be able to cope with the transition to those new roles successfully. It feels uncomfortable, doesn't it, to think about it like that? But we do it all the time. We let people step into new roles, leadership roles, where actually they have quite a significant impact and a huge influence on the experience that people are having around them. And we let them do that often without the experience or support that they need to do that really well. So those are some of the challenges. And where we see that come through is in the consequences of us maybe not stepping in and helping those leaders to make those transitions really well. A couple of studies I'd like to share with you. So Gartner did a study, and they identified that up to 49% of leaders were underperforming for up to 18 months after they took on their new role. That's a significant period of time that a leader maybe is struggling, not quite where they need to be, but there's also impacts there for the organisation and particularly the team that they are now leading. And McKinsey added to this information with their report, and they identified that between 27 to 46% of executives who were promoted were failing or disappointed for 2 years after that promotion. Again, this can't all be poor decisions made at recruitment. There's something here about how we're enabling people to make those transitions successfully, and we need to look at that and take that on board and understand the difference that we can make to avoid being in this statistic. Because there are consequences of those leaders not being in the right place. And the CEB Global report looked into this, and they saw that where there was a poor transition of a leader, this on average had an impact of 15% on team performance. So on average, so yes, absolutely, for some this won't have been as bad, but for some it will have been a lot worse. So depending on where your organisation is, the types of leaders that you have coming into there as well, there's a significant impact here. There's a significant cost of not getting this right and not helping leaders to get to a performance level quickly. And in addition to that performance aspect, you're seeing 20% of the team highly disengaged or potentially leaving. And there's huge costs with people leaving your organisation. So there's a cost of anywhere between 50 to 400% of somebody's salary to replace them. That's massive. So if you look at that from a perspective of a leader, mid to senior leaders are likely to be in that kind of 150% area of cost if they leave. So you may find that they've had this impact on performance through the year, and then they end up leaving. And this is the real impact and costs that you have of these leaders struggling. So you get the disruption for them, you get the disruption for the team. There's the costs of that. And what does that impact then in terms of reputation and strategic priorities for the organisation? This will impact on organisational success if your leaders aren't in the right place and their teams are infected from an engagement perspective. And what we often see, and the statistic that came out as well around retention, is that 23% of people will leave their role in the first 12 months. So you may have gone through all that disruption, and then you may lose them anyway, because there's a high proportion of people that will leave their role. And quite often they'll leave their role because they're struggling. Maybe their well-being is impacted, but also they may be struggling to see how they're making progress or if they're making progress in that role. And if we think about those statistics from Gartner and McKinsey, it'd be really easy to see why some people may, whether it's from an imposter syndrome perspective or just a lack of confidence, feel like this isn't the right thing for me. So we've got to be really careful of that and create an environment where leaders are actually able to kind of feel like they are being supported and that they're able to grow quickly into these new roles. But there is good news. Let me share the good news with you. So when there is brilliant onboarding in place, and this is across your organisation, so not just for your leaders, you will see an 82% reduction in turnover. And there's a 70% improvement in performance. These are really important statistics. So there's a cost aspect for there, but go back to what we've just talked about there in terms of disruption, impact on your reputation as an organisation, but also your strategic priorities and success of the organisation. So real benefits in making sure that you're putting appropriate and brilliant onboarding in place for all people, but especially your leaders, because we know the impact leaders have, and we know what it's like when they're not hitting the mark, but we also know what it's like when they are hitting the mark. And we want them to enable their teams to perform well because they're engaged, they enjoy working for them, they feel that their well-being is looked after effectively. That meaning they're more likely to stay themselves. But also the side benefit for that, for those in the people team, are if you've got your leaders that are stepping into their roles really quickly, and they are going to be less reliant on you for the wrong stuff. So you're going to be able to focus and be in the place that you want to be on those brilliant projects, driving the employee experience and getting less frustrated by leaders really who should be able to do the jobs that you've brought them in to do. And that's completely understandable where that frustration comes from. But we also then need to remember that we need to put the right things in place for them, that to be successful and to enable them to do that. So how can we enable them to do that? If we're thinking about getting our leaders into a place where they're more confident, more capable, more effective, for me, it's the 3 E's. And I'm going to talk you through those 3 E's now quickly. These are the foundations, I think, to enable your leaders to be more confident, capable, and effective quickly. And the 3 E's are engage, enable, and empower. And I'm going to just run through these quickly now, just to give you some insight into that. And for me, these should be the foundations of any great leadership development program, and they're the foundations of my Boost program. And I'll talk to you about Boost a little bit in a moment. So engage, this is about helping them to really understand their role. What is it you need from them? How can we get them excited about that new challenge that they're going to be facing? But how are they going to know that actually they are going to be supported and developed through that? So that engage phase is about getting them as excited as you can about this new challenge, but clear about what you're going to expect from them, but also that they're confident about the support that they're going to have to enable them to do this really well, which moves us to enable. So you need to make sure that they've got the skills, the capability to do this really well. Yes, they might have developed some leadership skills previously, but they're in a new context now. They're in a new organisation. They might have stepped up to a different level. So what is it they need to hone? So they may have some skills already that they need to really just lift. Or where are there some areas that actually they're just never done any development on? They've never faced those things before, but now they might be facing those things. So helping them to have access to the development that they need to get those skills in place so that they really can be capable and effective in their role. And the third is empower. So we can give people the knowledge, but actually the empowerment comes from figuring this out for themselves, bringing this to life for themselves. And this is where coaching alongside that learning and development comes in really well, because what you're helping them to do there is to really get to grips with what this means for them as a leader, how they're going to apply that, and how they're going to bring that to life within their team, within their part of the organisation, and what that means for them as a leader. That coaching, that empowerment space allows them to figure out how it's going. What is it that they can learn from what they've done so far? What might they need to tweak? What might they need to expand on further? What do they need to start again on? And that's okay too. But it's allowing them to figure that out for themselves. But it's really difficult to do that on your own. So creating a space for them to be able to talk through those challenges, think about how they are applying the learning that they've done. That is where you allow them to feel more empowered, where they are actively in a place of considering those challenges and applying them with the right level of support. So for me, those 3 E's, engage, enable, empower, are absolutely critical to any leadership development program. And as a result of having those in place, you will have more confident, capable, and effective leaders. Now it's a case of deciding how quickly you want to get them there. And that is a challenge. So for me, I had some amazing development. But it was later on in terms of when I started my role, so it was towards the 1 year mark. And it was incredibly transformational for me, that development. I wonder what difference it would have made if I'd had that sooner. I know it would have made a difference, because I know up until that point, I spent a lot of time overthinking, questioning what I was doing, feeling like I didn't know what I was doing, even though sometimes there were times I was fine. But I lacked that confidence. I lacked that ability to really feel at ease with the role that I was doing, because I didn't have access to that support and I hadn't had that development that I needed for that new role. So thinking about, yes, we've got a leadership development program coming up, brilliant. But if this is time sensitive, as we've seen from those statistics I've showed already, helping people early is what's really important here to enable people to kind of transform into that performance space as soon as possible. So I'm just going to introduce you to Boost now. Boost is my program that I've developed, and I've used those insights from my own experience, but also from the research there is around leadership development and what we need in our organisations for our leaders to be successful. So Boost is a personalised and one-to-one program. So it's not delivered in a group setting, it's delivered one-to-one via me. And I make sure that all of those interactions and interventions are completely designed around that individual. So they will have access to bite-sized learning, leadership learning predominantly, but obviously we can have a look at any topics that are useful for them to enable them to get to a level of success quickly, coaching and mentoring. And sometimes those will cross over and combine depending on the scenario and the situation. It's built around what that individual leader needs. It will run through that first 6 months that they're in role, but ideally I'd actually like to start working with them before they even start. So I would run an Engage for Success session with them to help them really understand their role, and get into a place where they're starting day one really engaged, excited, prepared for this new role in the right mindset. So I think that's a really exciting way of getting people ready for those new leadership roles. And as I've said, it's built around their context. What experience do they have, knowledge and confidence levels do they have in certain areas? And my role there is to help them get confident in those spaces, get capable and effective, so that they are ready to take on those challenges, but also that they've got somewhere safe to come back to and explore things that maybe haven't gone so well, or areas that they want to expand on further. And that's what I can provide for them. So in addition to that, there's a couple of other things I just wanted to touch on. Engagement with the business, with yourselves, your organisations is really important. So this isn't done completely independently. There would be high levels of engagement with somebody in the people team probably and senior leaders around what the leadership requirements are for this role and how we make sure that that is kind of threaded throughout the Boost programme for this individual. There'd also be there an opportunity for feedback and how I make sure that I'm clear on how you're experiencing this new leader, but also if there's any opportunities for us to kind of help this leader further if that's required. This would be caveated by a level of confidentiality, because I need that leader to have confidence and have a safe space to come to. The reality is they might not have shared some of these things with you anyway. So we will agree a level of confidentiality to ensure that that person really can be vulnerable and open about where they are. But also what I'll do then is provide a bridge for how we address some of those issues if they are quite significant, to ensure that nothing gets lost or missed out from that perspective. So there'd be high levels of engagement, and those would be agreed at different points throughout that 6-month programme to make sure that we're in a place where we're working effectively together. So alongside that engagement, the leadership, bite-sized sessions, the coaching and the mentoring, I also offer some other parts of the Boost programme. These are called priority calls. So they would be 15-minute calls that could be booked 24 hours in advance, where this leader is now facing a new little challenge that maybe they weren't expecting, or they're going into a meeting and they really need to hold themselves to account on something. And they just need a little moment just to kind of center themselves, get themselves prepared, get themselves in a good place, so that they're ready to go ahead and challenge and take on that challenge or deal with that situation effectively. They also will have a private workspace, where all the materials that we're working on will be available. They'll also be able to access kind of communication with me, to make sure that they have what they need throughout that 6-month period. And also those other features as well, but please ask me for that and I can talk you through those. So just wanted to share with you really that I've worked with leaders as they are making those transitions already. And I've done that throughout my career, but I've also done it since I've started my business. And I love that opportunity to work with leaders as they're going through that transition. I know how challenging it is. It's testing, but it's also incredible. It's an incredible experience to work with a team, lead a department, and see progress being made by that team. So taking an opportunity to be able to work with your leaders would be just a huge privilege. But also, I want to help them be successful and help you be successful in improving the leadership capability across your organisation. And I think Boost is a good way to do that. So just wrapping up, I will only be offering limited places each quarter to ensure that level of quality and availability with me. So there aren't numerous places available, but there will be a limited amount. And whilst I'm in these early phases of Boost and bringing Boosts to the market, that means at the moment there aren't any real limits on the access during that programme. So this is to make sure that I'm testing really what's required, but also to make sure that your leaders have a fantastic experience in that first 6 months through this Boost programme. Guaranteed results for this. Leaders will be more confident, capable and effective as a result of going through this programme. And if we're getting to a stage where we're not seeing those levels of results, then I will keep working with them until they are in that place. And if that goes beyond the 6 months, it goes beyond the 6 months. But I guarantee that this will have the positive effects that you expect and you will need from your leaders in these roles. So this is a great way of investing in your leaders, but also it's a way of protecting the investment that you've made so far. You'll have spent a lot of time and money getting these leaders either recruited or promoted. So this is about avoiding that statistic of them failing or being disappointing for too long or underperforming for too long. This is where Boost will step in. So I'd love to answer any of the questions that you have. Feel free to book a call, come and have a conversation with me. I'd love to chat with you about it. Feel free to kind of use any of the insights that I've shared with you today. I think those 3 E's are foundational in terms of how we look at leadership development. So have a think about how those apply in your organisation. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you about that too. So there will be links available alongside this video to book a call with me, and also information about Boost. So I hope that you found that useful today, and please do get in touch with any questions that you have.